Hello, everyone. I'm Tom Nobucaro, and welcome to Politics in Perspective. We have a very special show this week. A friend of mine with a long history in the music industry is going to join us for our newsmaker interview, or our difference maker interview. But before that, I'll still do my opening statement and talk about the news of the week, including the Democrats cementing themselves as the party of protest. We'll get to that, and also political roundup at the end. But let's go right in, because my producer wants me to go right into our opening statement. So let's do it right now. There are the pictures of Democrats on the night of the State of the Union. Over 30-something million people saw the State of the Union. Trump gets high numbers when it comes to the amount of people watching the State of the Union. It was incredibly long, but I want to talk to you about something very different, because it was a speech, right? It's the State of the Union. So what did he say isn't as important as the visuals. Visuals in the modern era are just about everything. I mean, go back to Nixon and JFK, their debate. If you listen to it, people thought Nixon won. But if you watched it, because Nixon was uncomfortable and sweating, and Kennedy was cool, calm, and collected, people thought Kennedy won. Reagan used visuals like no other president in history to that time. Excuse me. And along with Michael Deaver, who orchestrated all of these things, he used visuals to great effect. It is the visuals from the State of the Union that people are going to remember. And it is those visuals that are cementing the Democrats. You see the pictures here, Omar and Tlaib there on national TV acting in that manner. Spanberger gave the reply, and in the middle, you have the Democrats holding their own people's rally, which nobody showed up to. But again, it was the visuals. So let's talk about that. What they did in this speech, of course, they really accentuated the pictures of Congressional Medal of Honor, the hockey team, the young girl, all of those things, personalized policies of President Trump. But he used the visuals to draw contrast with the Democrats. And that's what's going to be remembered. And of course, what is already in television commercials. The Democrats sitting on their hands with sometimes angered faces, like you see there, other times just blank. And their face is just blank. And think about it. Trump said, stand if, and then he would say something, if you are for Americans before illegals. And the Democrats sat, and Trump then said, these people are crazy. It is those visuals that this speech will be remembered, not the words, the visuals. It was a really long speech. Speeches by the hour are forgotten by the minute, or forgotten by the hour. Jefferson said that. But because they weaved them with these moments that created these visuals, this speech will be remembered for a very, very long time, and will be used throughout the midterms to demonstrate where the Democrats are as a party. Simply saying the Democrats are against the SAVE Act, they sat on their hands. Or simply saying the Democrats aren't for Americans versus illegals. If Trump put out a press release on that, it would have little to no impact, because who would cover it? But the fact that on national TV in the State of the Union, he said, support the SAVE Act. And if you were watching closely, the cameras pulled back and you saw the whole room. The camera shot was from over the heads of the Democrats to the Republicans. The Republicans stood up in unison, cheered, along with J.D. Vance and the Speaker Johnson, but the Democrats sat silent. Now, keep in mind, the SAVE Act is supported by 83% of Americans. So that's a strong visual. And then, of course, the Americans versus illegal immigrants. Those visuals will mark this speech and mark this time in history as a new way to use the State of the Union. Now, it works for the Republicans because they're on the normal issues. It is normal to say that men shouldn't be in girls' bathrooms. It is normal to say that a parent should have a say over their child having issues related to anything trans. It is normal to say that we should have voter ID when you had to have ID to get in the building that night, or to buy alcohol, or get on a flight, so many other things, right? It is normal to say we want American dollars going to Americans, not to illegals. So that worked really well for Trump. What will the Democrats do the next time they do the State of the Union? Will they use a similar tactic and say, stand if you want to make sure every family on earth or in America is taken care of by the government? We'll have to see, because that's the socialism. But as it relates to the Democrats, that whole visual was about protesting. They are officially the party of protest. I have talked about this for some time. The last time they were the party of protest was during the 60s. And then what happened? Well, people saw they embraced those protests, and decided maybe they could sympathize with some of their thoughts, but didn't think they should have the presidency. Think about it. They had a popular president in Johnson. They had the protest, he dropped out, and they revived Nixon's career. Jimmy Carter was the next Democrat in office one term, then it was Reagan for two, then it was Bush, then Clinton, never getting to 50% in either election, and then back to Bush. Those decades were dominated by Republicans, not by the party of protests. So the Democrats are setting themselves up for a repeat of what happened before. If we go to the next slide, we had Spanberger, the Democrats gave the reply. She's the newly elected governor from Virginia, and she's also a bald-faced liar. She campaigned that she was going to be moderate, and as soon as she got into office, she took radical positions and is looking to raise taxes in sundry different ways, even though Virginia has a large surplus. But as far as it relates to what I'm talking about today and the party of protests, Spanberger, in her speech, hailed student protesters, as you see from this Fox headline, who ransacked Kroger after the walkout. So here she is in her speech elevating the party of protests. But beyond that, I want all of you to, if you can, go look at her speech word for word. She says the Democrats are working hard on affordability. That's it. The rest of it is pablum, anti-Trump spewing, and nothing else. There's not a single proposal from the Democrats in the alternative to Trump. Not one proposal. They claim they're working on affordability. Dear Governor, raising taxes does not make anything more affordable. It makes it less affordable. But not a single proposal from the Democrats. Now keep in mind, she represents the entire Democrat Party of elected officials in alternative to what Trump said. She said he was lying, on and on and on, but not a single proposal. Just criticism, just protest, because that's who the Democrats are. They are just protesters at this stage, and totally irresponsible at that. So let's look at the midterm update. Here's the reality of what's going on. The Democrats are protesting. The media is helping them. And the question becomes, who will win the midterms? Now, one thing we have to keep in mind is that this is a very unusual midterm because of the redistricting that has occurred in California, in Texas and Florida to be. And here is my estimates on the numbers. In Texas, Republicans will pick up 5 seats. In California, they'll lose 4 to 5 seats. In Virginia, the Dems could pick up 4 seats if the voters pass a bill to do a redistricting this year. But it's not certain. Maryland, the Dems could pick up 1 doing the same thing, but it's not certain. In Utah, it looks like the Dems could pick up 1 seat. In Florida, it's very probable that the Republicans will pick up 5. If all of those seats came to be, that would be a net plus of 1 for the Democrats picking up a seat just on that dynamic alone. Then you have to deal with the historical dynamic that the party in the White House tends to lose seats. Then there's the issue of the economy and affordability, and whether the Republicans take on a agenda and say, if you elect us in the fall, in November, we will get the SAVE Act passed if it doesn't pass before that. We will, and list 3 or 4 or 5 things that they're going to do and see what the Democrats put up. Because their only policy is spending, and it's spending that caused the affordability crisis. We'll have to see. That's my opening statement. We'll be right back with my special guest. Thanks to Ex-American News for putting this out each Sunday night, along with worldview2.com, AUN TV, of course, YouTube and Rumble. You can catch them all at politicalvanguard.com. And if you would, you could check out my book and my books, buy them at tomdell.com or Amazon, and join me on Substack. I'm Tom Del Beccaro. We'll be right back. Hey everyone, I'm Tom Del Beccaro. Welcome back to Politics in Perspective. We're going to do a special show this week because we don't need politics all the time. But I thought about this during the Super Bowl halftime, and how what I thought was, a ridiculous halftime show. I mean, let's face it. First of all, it was in San Francisco, not Miami. If it was in Miami for a Super Bowl, it made a little sense. But in cold San Francisco, I don't think so. But it just sort of struck a nerve with me about how ridiculous the music industry is today, at least in my opinion, and I think in our special guest's opinion, my good friend, Ray Appleton. Let's bring Ray in. He has an interesting history. There he is, the rocker himself. Now, Ray Appleton does have an interesting, didn't you start spinning records and what year was that? You were
1969.
Wow. And you also worked at A&M.
A&M Records, yeah. The greatest record label in the world.
All right. And what years were those?
Only for a couple of years. I worked independently with them and then directly for them. So we're talking, oh boy. The first was an independent contract through Supertramp. I worked with them. I was credited with discovering Supertramp.
Wow.
Go figure. The gold record's hanging over my toilet in the main bathroom. It is. I could probably honor it a little bit better than that. So we're talking 1975 through 70 through 80, and then back again for a couple of years in the early 80s, and then back into radio. Yeah.
And you're a musician yourself. How many, you're a bass guitar player. How many bass guitars do you have?
You almost didn't get that out.
No, I didn't.
You're a musician. How many bass guitars do I have? Yeah. 29.
There you go.
29.
and you've met just about everybody in the industry. Ray has a great show on KMJ in California, which covers the most square miles of any radio show in the state. I appear on it regularly, and I love music. I'm completely incapable of music. It turns out keeping time is important. Who knew? But like all things, I study music, and Ray and I banter about it, and I try and stump Ray. But today we're not going to do that. He allows me to
Well,
stump.
you do a great job. You're one of the few people that can stump me, really. People that know me marvel at that. Who's that guy, Tom, that's always like really pissing you off, you know?
There you go. Okay, so I contend, as the Bad Bunny experience demonstrated to me, that music died a ways back. Now that, of course, there's the famous American Pie by Don McLean, a song that I burned out on because it was played so much by my older brothers and sisters. Anyway, the day the music died, which refers to the airplane accident. But I say music in reality died in the 1980s. So this is the title of our segment here, When the Music Really Died. But I wanted, because you're such a music historian, because you actually lived it all, how was Mr. Bach when you spoke to him, by the way?
Mr. Bach. He's full of it, isn't he, kids? This is
Yeah,
why I love him so much.
All right. So to me, there's three stages of rock music. And I'm not talking about all music here. I'm not talking about Mariah Carey or Karen Carpenter, or who's marvelous. But to me, there's three stages of rock. There is the formative stage. There is the 60s and the 70s, which is where the singer-songwriter, the artist involved in the music, and then when music died in the 80s. So we're going to put up a slide here which shows some of the characters from the formative years. And everybody knows that rock came out of, in America, the tradition of the blues and otherwise, with great figures like Muddy Waters and the like. So you are a generation of music older than me, because you knew the 60s as a young adult. I was really quite young. So, but what was and so you're working at a record label. What did those formative years, Bill Haley and Muddy Waters and all of those people represent? You heard that music what did that represent in music?
What did it represent?
Yeah, and on the start of music, and how the depth that they had, or what they were creating.
Well, I think it represented exactly what you're calling it, the beginning. The beginning of a movement that has yet to end. It's gotten worse. It's soured, but that was definitely the beginning, and it was the beginning of a lot of breakout black acts that finally melded their weight into the white acts, and it all became one for a while in the 60s and the 70s, which I think was really important. And beyond the 60s and the 70s, I'm just not there musically. In the 80s, it began to, when we homogenized rock music, in the 70s. By the time we got to the 80s, we began to pull away again. The white X became very poppy, very very melodical, less rhythm, emphasis on the rhythm, which kind of
Okay. But before we get to that, I mean, the music took, let's talk about the 60s in a little depth, because the whole world changed musically with the production of the Beatles. Now, I use the word production because the Everly Brothers were singing like the Beatles, or gave the Beatles great influence. but the Beatles blew it out from a production standpoint and changed everything. I mean, even Ozzy Osbourne says that the Beatles was the reason he picked up a guitar, right? So how did we get from the blues starting rock and roll to the Rolling Stones, the Who, the Beatles, and all of that? How did that transition occur?
Black acts. When you're talking about the 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 Beatles embracing black acts, one of their early tours was with Little Richard in England, and that changed their focus on music. As a result, that that influenced the Rolling Stones greatly. The first song that the Rolling Stones did that was a major hit for them over there was "I Want to Be Your Man," which was written by the Beatles, and that was also influenced by Little Richard. They said had they not toured with Little Richard, they had not written those edgy rhythmic songs that they wrote, and half of them they peddled off to the Rolling Stones, and it just kind of grew from there.
And you had later on, you have Led Zeppelin talking about, and especially Robert Plant talking about those Southern figures, black figures that had such a huge impact on. So you don't have rock without that early jazz and that early blues.
True. Is there a question there?
Yeah, go. You can amplify on it because to me, the point I'm getting at with all of this and how you got from those acts in the 40s and the 50s and the way guitars were bent coming out of the 50s and into the 60s disappears by the 80s.
Yeah.
But the central point I think that people maybe don't know, but what is gone is that the artist was at the center of that universe. Bob Dylan was the center of his universe, not the production company. The Beatles were a little bit more produced, but when Led Zeppelin went into the studio for Led Zeppelin 1, and they did that in, what was it, 13 days or something like that. Their producer wasn't saying, here's what I want you to make. So given the age of the 60s, which you lived in and were starting to play music in, what was that like? What was King Crimson like? What were these stars like who were so talented and allowed to do what they wanted to do?
They were freedom. They basically, I'd say they were freedom. They were free to do what they wanted to do without, you were saying, coaching from production staffs. We get to the progressive rock era, yes, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, one of my all-time favorites, King Crimson. Boy, that's just a musical freaking explosion. That type of large, fat, music has never been duplicated in contemporary music or anywhere. And they took the best of classical music, they took the best of the blues, and they took all of that and married into one genre, which we call progressive rock, not to be confused with the progressive end of politics. Dear God, no. And that genre of music held strong for a long, long time until it eventually began to burn itself out, i.e., the Sex Pistols, getting it back to strong rhythm again, strong rock and roll, very basic, and not overproduced. Kind of it just went full circle. Because when you're saying the Sex Pistols, okay, well then you're talking about a relationship to a Gene Vincent and acts like that from the 50s. So it just kind of circled back to that after we went through that whole progressive rock thing in the late 60s and all the way through the 70s.
So, even what impressed me about that a lot these bands that existed still play. The Rolling Stones are still out there.
Yeah.
Led Zeppelin could tour, but they have that personality issues. Pink Floyd, now and again. You have these bands from way back when, still touring, and I maintain that the reason why they're still touring is because they wrote actual music that is enduring and will be listened to 30 years from now. And whether it's Joni Mitchell or whoever it is in that singer-songwriter era, and I'm expanding not just David Gates, singer-songwriter, but the fact that it was the Rolling Stones that wrote Paint It Black, which to me is a total fusion of rock and soul and everything that was coming out of it. The fact that those great artists existed then and they were the center of the universe is why they still can tour now. What's your thoughts on that?
No, I agree with you. You bring up Joni Mitchell. I blow a lot of minds when people know me as a kind of an old seasoned rocker, and I like my music very heavy but my all-time favorite artist is Joni Mitchell.
No.
And when people hear that, they absolutely fall over. But it was that ability to convey a song with a great melody that still had some rhythms to it, especially later in her career when she was doing music with the LA Express, Tom Scott and everybody. It was just a remarkable fusion that still stands the test of time. She's in her 70s and she's still out there, performing, and she's, doing an album now, from what I hear. Another record. I can't believe it. It's amazing.
Okay, yeah, but to me, okay, so we head into the 70s. The 60s has all these stunning artists, band like the Who, the Rolling Stones, but really the depth, and of course the Beatles, which popularized popular music and inspired countless kids to get to pick up a guitar or whatever it was, right? You get into the 70s, but and you find, for me, things start to change. There still are artists. I think the greatest composer, Elton John, who had a incredible a classical musical background, who was a sessions well, yes, he was, artist, right? Which meant that, like Jimmy Page, he had to learn to play everything and then was able to create songs. And
But even with his start, sure, he was a session musician. Before that, what was he? He was playing with Long John Baldry and the Steam Packet.
yeah,
And that was just balls out, black influenced rock and roll. And that is what gave us Elton John. In fact, his name comes from members of that band.
Yeah, exactly. So again, these musicians who actually knew how to play. And then this is sort of my point. Although I don't want to skip over the 70s, because 70s had a lot of soft rock, right? Where did these songs like Henry Gross and blah 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 blah, where did soft rock come from? I don't think I've ever asked you this question.
Well, soft rock came from the antithesis of hard rock. We were rocking so hard, all of a sudden it needed to calm down. So we had like David Gates and Bread and these groups that had brought the tempo way down, and and I can understand why it was there. That doesn't mean I like it, and I didn't. I hated it, but it had its place. Definitely had its place.
Okay, so all right, but there's a drummer named Ray Appleton, isn't there, in music? So tell me about
He passed away.
Yeah, tell me about Karen Carpenter and her ability to sing and play the drums, because she was didn't she one year win some award for being the best drummer?
Well, again, you're talking about another great A&M act.
Yes, they picked them out of nowhere and said, "Do what you do."
They
Herb Alberts.
I can't remember what award she won, but she was an incredible drummer and the ability to sing at the same time. I thought it was so stupid that the her people, her management folks, pulled her off the drums and put her up front. Tried to make her a vocalist. She weighed like 9 pounds. I mean, this is why she died. And it became very evident she had a problem when she was put up front. She should have stayed behind the drums. She was happiest behind the drums. She always admitted she was a drummer first, and she might even still be alive if she was not.
Wow. But she
Uh,
does have an unbelievable voice.
oh yeah, she has a wonderful voice, but at the same time, they should have left well enough alone and stopped with the formula. Oh, we have to put her up front.
Okay.
Come on.
Okay, so this is the beginning. This is the reason why I raise this in some degree is because now we're headed towards the production of music, and I want to play a little piece from a guy who I loved. Uh, Why don't Annie, if you can play the piece, and I'll have Ray react to it.
Oh no, here we go. Here we go.
About that this weekend, thinking a lot about it. I think the two basic types of music indigenous to this country are the black music, blues, and the kind of folk music that was brought over from Europe, and I guess they call it country music, or the kind of West Virginia high and lonesome sound. That those are the two main streams of root American music. There might be others, I don't know, but it looks like, and like 10 years ago, what they called rock and roll was kind of a blending of those two forms. And I guess what's happening now is that rock is kind of dying out, and everyone is going back to the roots again. Some are going back into country, and some are going back into basic blues. I guess in 4 or 5 years, the new generation's music will be, it'll have a synthesis of those two elements and some third thing that'll be entire. Maybe it'll be, it might rely heavily on electronics, tapes. I can kind of envision maybe one person with a lot of machines, tapes, and electronic setups, singing or speaking and using machines.
Ray, so that, of course, is the legendary Jim Morrison, who I think, I mean, he sadly dies at 28 years old in the late 60s. He is as good a frontman when he was right as there was, in my view. But does that not say, is that unbelievable that he talks about what, and this is what I talk about when the music died. I tell people I don't know anything about music after 1983. Well, I do, but it's not music to me. Music is, what we're hearing now is pop art. It's the difference between if you go to Italy and you see a Renaissance painting, or you come to America and some guy has a bucket and throws paint on the wall. So first of all, tell me about, am I right that Morrison was that brilliant? And what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, his prediction, I'd never heard that before. His prediction was right on. And I even like what you said about throwing paint on the wall or whatever. There was a musical attempt at that type of thing, and it was a complete failure. And that year where we lost Jimi Hendrix, Mama Cass, Jim Morrison, Janis Joplin. I mean, I felt like we had been hit by an atomic bomb, that we had lost so many the same age in the same year. I'm like, Jesus, what is going on? Dear Lord, please stop this. And thank God it did, or there wouldn't have been anybody left. But his prediction was fairly accurate, though. What I heard there, talking about machines and all that, and that's what happened, in the '80s. I mean, we gave up on music and we trusted machines. we gave up on human beings being able to take that machine or that instrument and do something with it, and just, defer it to a machine, whatever, to make that noise, whatever it might be. I mean, the drum machine, for example, was the first synthesizer taken into the studio to replace drummers. And from there, okay, we can place the rhythm section. We can use a machine. Oh, we can get rid of the bass player too. Bye bye. I hated that. It was horrible.
But aren't we still suffering from that? But because
Yes,
to me, what happened was once that dynamic started, we stopped educating artists on how to make music, and so they didn't have to make it. They could push a button, and suddenly everybody was produced instead of writing what they felt in art. Now, that doesn't mean there are no artists that didn't do this, but there was a great deal of it lost. And I'm going to make a silly representation, but I still think it's valid. Britney Spears had a voice, and you never heard it again once she became popular. They just completely created this caricature and got, she's obviously gone through hell. But that's what, to me, that it was representative of what happened when producers took over and machines took over, and we didn't teach anybody how to play music.
well, I mean, yeah, and you mentioned Britney Spears had a voice. She did. And when they started phasing her voice,
Yes.
the voice was gone, And even though it was a popular thing to do at the time, they really overcooked it with her. And it was bad. It was very bad. And it was representative of a genre of music that stuck with us for a while, that I think basically ruined the natural talent of a lot of individuals. And she is one of them.
And to me, that period, which started in the mid 80s, is when the music truly died. Okay, I want to bring up a graphic here because I've had this beef on your show and we've talked about it. And this is the list of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame's people that they have put up for nomination. And who is it? The Gene Simmons has carried the argument along with Dennis DeYoung in Styx publicly. But the current list includes Mariah Carey. Okay, she's a big star. We can't deny that, right? Sade, who I've seen Sade 7 times. She's an enormous talent who doesn't play rock and roll.
No, she's a jazz artist. I don't care what anybody says.
Exactly. You have hip hop artists, right? New Edition, or on and on and on. Are there some rockers in there? Yes, Billy Idol. But here is my point. And this is what I got so exercised on your show. I know you remember this. So when I was a kid, I loved Bad Company. It was a great band. One of the first supergroups, right? They brought together your guys from your King Crimson and
Mott the Hoople.
Yeah, Paul Rogers.
From Free.
And they made them wait 100 years to get in. So explain to me why Boston isn't in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. By the way, Boston was super important legally to rock and roll because they were one of the first bands to fight the label. Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, of course, I remember that.
So how the hell are they not in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? But Mariah Carey, Dolly Parton? Your turn.
I think what the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame is starting to judge on is sales. And that has been a huge mistake. Sales should be completely wiped off, that whole qualifying aspect of a potential Rock and Roll Hall of Fame nomination. Period. Go away.
But it's not even rock and roll. What Gene Simmons says when Led Zeppelin gets in the, I don't know what he made some ridiculous, the R&B Hall of Fame. Give me a call. right? Dennis DeYoung said the same thing, and he brought up Paul Rogers. What angered me most about Paul Rogers is that he says about it, the issue is he's of such an age right now that he couldn't travel to be in the Hall of Fame. And oh, by the way, Bad Company was important to rock because they ushered in this era of supergroups, right? Where you had a really popular 60s group and then they transformed and created rock for the ages. But again, what people want to know, what is the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame? Why do they do this? Who are these bleeping people?
Well, it's apparent those bleeping people are apparently artists, but I don't know what they're smoking. The nominations for this year that I went through yesterday on my show for a little bit, I had to stop because it just wasn't. I was so pissed off. It's not rock and roll. It was this year's list of nominees, which includes Boston, thank God,
Billy Idol.
Billy Idol, and a couple that and Iron Maiden. Hello, Iron Maiden. Oh, geez.
Do they play rock and roll? I'm pretty sure they do.
Yeah, Iron Maiden rocks harder than anybody. I don't know. I don't know. The fact. Let's talk about Paul Rogers. Paul Rogers is the greatest front man of all time. I don't give a shit what anybody says. He's the greatest front man of all times. They have to wait until he's got one foot in the grave to honor him, and the poor guy can't even travel. I mean, thank God Simon Kirke was there, the original drummer, with Free from the very beginning with Paul Rogers, who could speak to that. And you could see a little bit of, little tinge of, why did you wait so long in his acceptance of that. Boz Morell dies early of cancer, the bass player. Mick Ralphs from Mott the Hoople, he dies of essentially old age. I mean, come on. I think that was, you know what? If I had been Bad Company, I would have said, "You, no thanks,
Steve Miller.
no thank you."
Steve Miller did essentially that. Others have done that as well. Ray, we ran out of time here because
God, we were just getting good.
All right. Well, we'll come back and we should turn this into. We should go in depth on some of these things. But
next time I'll comb my hair. I promise.
All right. I don't know what that will look like. I've never seen it. All right, everybody. Thanks for watching this portion of the show. We'll be right back with more politics, or in this case, music in perspective. Welcome back to Politics in Perspective. I hope you enjoyed that. And we'll try and do more of those sort of cultural issues instead of all politics all the time in the future. This is our political roundup section. And we're going to cover the Hillary and Bill Clinton, the Clintons, and their testimony. But I also want to just harken back to my original opening statement because it's very interesting. There are several Democrat politicians who are working with Trump and standing aside from the Democrats in general. One of those is the communist Mondami. Now, he's arguably the most far-out Democrat that there is today, but he wants to build housing. Now, his plan for building housing won't really work, but he has visited Trump twice about it, and there may be an intersection where these two agree and say, okay, here's how I can help you do that. That's a very interesting dynamic at the most far left, right? In Michigan, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, she is sort of doing the same thing. She cut taxes, the no tax on tips. She's the most prominent Democrat governor to do so. She thanked President Trump last week over a project in which the federal government assisted. And lo and behold, and of course, there is Fetterman, who talks to just about anyone. And Fetterman, interestingly enough, has a 2/3 approval rating among Republicans or higher, and only a 30% approval rating among Democrats. Will he win re-election in those circumstances? Well, he could, simply because the Republicans vote for him over the Democrats. We'll have to see whether he stays a Democrat for very much longer. Who knows? So, the Democrats, by and large, are the party of protests, yet still, there are some that are sticking their neck out. And Gretchen Whitmer wants to run for president as Newsom sinks and Kamala Harris is Kamala Harris. That may be her opening. But let's go legal for a little bit. As you know, I've been an attorney for too long. And we had the depositions of the Clintons. And what did they do? Well, both of them had their little meltdowns. And both of them were on the attack throughout the process. And that is typical Clinton. Bill lost it or got very angry over the fact that Hillary was called in. I'm sorry. You had Maxwell, his woman Friday, at your wedding. And Hillary, remember, she wiped her computer with, but said there was nothing but wedding things on it. Well, think about it. Maxwell was there. Anyway, they brought her in. What did Bill Clinton do? First thing he did was get angry. How dare you bring Hillary in about this? Hillary got upset too, saying the same thing. Why are you doing this? I shouldn't be here. What do the Clintons do? When the Clintons do something wrong, they go on to the attack. When Bill Clinton wronged all of those women way back in the day before he was running for president and it was discovered, what did Hillary do once it started to come out? She went from, oh, you have to believe women, to the bimbo eruptions and attacking them viciously. So what do the Clintons do? Whenever they do something wrong, they go on the attack. And that's what you saw this weekend or Thursday, Friday with the Clintons. First of all, they had bad memories. They wrote all these memoirs, but they don't have memories of this guy, right? They never turned him in. They said they didn't see anything bad. Maybe by Bill Clinton standards, he didn't see anything bad. But what did Trump do? Trump knew the guy. He got in, their orbits started to mix. And Trump, as soon as he determined that this guy was doing bad things, he turned him in. That, of course, is not good enough for the Democrats. They just say, President Trump is mentioned X amount of times in there. Many of those times, it's Epstein going back at Trump. But at the end of the day, what we know from this exercise is that there are many pictures with Bill. There's even pictures of him getting his massages. And according to Hillary, he's just doing charitable work, which, as some have said, an interesting use of the word charitable. We still don't know the answer to the one question that I think matters. You always hear the line, follow the money. Well, how did this man get all that money? Shouldn't that tell us a lot about who was in his influence, who he was beholden to, and who was acting according to his requests? Until we get to the bottom of that, we're going to be in the dark on Epstein for a long period of time. What did we find out this week? Well, we found out ever more about the weaponization of the FBI and the DOJ under Biden. We saw Jack Smith waltz in not that long ago acting like he did nothing wrong and said he'd do it all again. Well, he needs to be indicted. Here, this week, we found out two things. We found out just how very much the FBI was out of control. There is Susie Wiles, who was part of the Trump campaign, higher up position. Her and Kash Patel, the now FBI director, it turns out that they were spied on as well. This is unbelievable. They were private citizens at the time. They were spied on as well. And in the case of Susie Wiles, stunningly, the FBI listened in on her conversation with her attorney. Someone tried to pass this off that he agreed to this. The attorney has said, that's outrageous. Of course I didn't. But that demonstrates again, when you add on that they spied on the Speaker of the House, a total of 12 politicians, on and on and on, you see the incredible overreach that they were undertaking. We also learned the incredible coordination between the White House and the DA, Fani Willis, in Georgia. We know that her boyfriend went to the White House, but there's no record of what was said in their meeting. If you meet with them for an hour and there's no record, what do you think they're doing? Talking about the chances in football coming forward? No. It was very clear what they were doing was coordinating how they were going to file charges against President Trump. We also found out that the office of the White House, the people working around Biden, but in this case, they may well have been the people making all the decisions because Biden didn't know what was going on. They made it easy for Fani Willis, who was obviously lacking real evidence, to charge 18 people with a RICO conspiracy, right? So she was granted access to certain things that no other DA in the country would be getting. And of course, those things occurred at or around the time that her boyfriend had gone and met with the White House. So it's very clear that the weaponization was occurring. And as some have said, this might be just the tip of the iceberg that we've discovered so far. But unless somebody gets indicted for doing this, what's to stop them from doing it again? And that's really the issue going on here. Because if the FBI and the DOJ have a say, and years ago I wrote about how the DOJ and the FBI wanted to decide who should be the president. Way long ago in 2017, I talked about in a Forbes article about how they conspired to shut down the Hillary investigation and go after Trump. If they're allowed to do that with impunity, meaning nobody goes to jail, then they'll do it again. And that's the real issue here. If nobody gets indicted by this DOJ with the help of the FBI, then things are going to keep going on, and our republic, sadly, will die new deaths with every election. Well, that's our show for this week. Thanks so very much. I'm Tom Del Beccaro. Please join us each Sunday night for another offering of Politics in Perspective.